The underground bunker beneath New Seoul was cold and quiet on the morning when Commander Park Soo-jin found something that would change everything. She did not know it yet. She was simply doing her job, searching through files in the Earth Defense Ministry's old storage vaults. The year was 2287, and most people had forgotten why these archives even existed. Park was a careful woman. At 53 years old, she had spent her entire life in military service. Her dark hair was streaked with gray, and her sharp eyes missed nothing. She had been ordered to find any old records about Earth's early agreements with the Galactic Council. It was supposed to be routine work. No one expected to find anything important in these dusty digital storage units. But Park was thorough. She moved slowly through the files, reading documents that dated back 300 years. Most of them were boring: trade agreements, technology-sharing contracts, that kind of thing. Then she found something different, a file labeled Orbital Development Tax Account, classified. She opened it. What she read made her stop moving completely. The file was an ancient database, so old that it had been protected with encryption that humanity's early computers could not break. But times had changed. Modern technology made the password take only a few seconds to crack. When it opened, Park saw numbers that made her breath catch. 47 trillion credits. That was the total amount that Earth had paid to the Galactic Council over 3 centuries. The file showed every payment, every date, every claimed reason for the money. Earth had been charged a tax for something called Orbital Development Protection. According to the contract, this money was meant to pay for advanced technology, military protection, and economic support. Park read the entire database that morning without moving from her chair. She called 2 people she trusted: Min Ho, a brilliant economist, and Dr. Kang Ji-woo, a data expert who could find patterns in information that normal people missed. Both of them worked in the Defense Ministry. Both of them came to her office within the hour. "Look at this," Park said simply, turning her screen so they could see. Min-ho's face changed as he read. He was a young man, only 35, with quick eyes and an active mind. Dr. Kang Ji-woo was older, more serious. She had spent 20 years analyzing information systems. When she finished reading, she looked at Park with an expression that Park had never seen before, a mix of anger and shock. "This cannot be right," Dr. Kang said. 47 trillion? That is more than the total wealth of Earth. "It is not more now," Min-ho said quietly. "But 300 years ago, we were much poorer. This tax, it would have taken everything we had." Park pulled up another file. "There is more. I found records of what we actually received in return. What they discovered over the next few days was a crime that stretched across centuries. According to the documents, Earth had been promised advanced technology, military support against other alien civilizations, and help building space colonies. The records showed that Earth had received almost none of it. The actual technology transfer was worth less than 2 trillion credits. The military protection had been minimal. The colony help had barely existed. "They lied to us," Dr. Kang said on the 4th day, when her analysis was complete. "Systematically. Every single decade, the same pattern. We paid more. We received less. And they documented it all." Min-ho created a detailed financial model. By his calculations, humanity had been overcharged by over 300 trillion credits, not counting the interest that would have accumulated over 3 centuries. They had paid for a house, but received only the foundation. "Why did no one catch this before?" Park asked. "Because," Min-ho explained, 300 years ago, humanity was weak and isolated. The Galactic Council could charge whatever they wanted, and when humans raised questions, the Council simply ignored them. There was nothing Earth could do about it. We were not strong enough to challenge them. Park thought about that. Humanity had always been at a disadvantage in the galaxy. They had arrived to interstellar civilization relatively late. Other species had been traveling between stars for millions of years. Humanity had only been doing it for a few centuries. Humans were physically weaker than many alien species. They had less advanced technology. In any direct conflict, humanity would lose. But they had something else. Humans were patient, humans were intelligent, and humans did not forget. "We need to tell the Secretary General," Park said. 2 weeks later, she stood in the office of Lee Nari, the United Nations General Secretary. Lee was a woman in her 60s with a steady presence and an excellent mind for politics. She had led Earth through many difficult negotiations with alien civilizations. When Park showed her the data, Lee's reaction was quiet and controlled. "How certain are you?" Lee asked. 99% certain," Park said. "The documents are real. The math is correct. Every claim we made can be verified from their own records." Lee stood and walked to the window. From her office on the highest level of the UN building, she could see all of New Seoul. Millions of humans lived in this city. Billions lived on Earth. For 3 centuries, all of them had been paying a debt that was false. "If we demand payment now," Lee said slowly, "the Council will refuse. We do not have the power to make them listen." "No," Park agreed, "we do not." "But we could," Lee said. She turned back to face Park. "Not now, but in time, we could become strong enough. The question is whether we have the patience to wait." Park understood what the Secretary General was saying. It would take many years to build humanity's strength. It would take careful planning, secret work, and absolute focus. But if they succeeded, if humanity ever became powerful enough, they could demand what was owed. "I can prepare for it," Park said. Lee Nari walked back to her desk and sat down. She pulled out a blank piece of paper and began to write. "Starting now, no one knows about this. The files remain classified at the highest level. You will gather evidence. You will build a case so strong that when we finally present it, the Council cannot deny it, and you will tell no one what you are doing, not your family, not your friends, no one." Park nodded. She understood the weight of what was being asked. "How long will it take?" Lee asked. Park thought about what would need to happen. Humanity would need better military ships. They would need new technology. They would need allies among the stars. They would need to build strength without the Council noticing what they were doing. 10 years, Park said. Maybe less if we are lucky. Probably more if we are not. Lee Nari looked at her for a long moment. Then she smiled. A smile that was not happy, but was satisfied and cold. "Then we wait," the Secretary General said. "And when we are ready, the entire Galactic Council will learn what happens when you cheat humanity." On that day, Commander Park Soo-jin accepted a mission that would consume the rest of her life. She did not know yet how many people would be involved. She did not know what sacrifices would be required. She only knew that humanity had been wronged, and that one day the debt would be collected. The galaxy did not know it yet, but its power structure was about to change forever. 8 years passed. The galaxy did not know what was happening on Earth, and that was exactly how Commander Park Soo-jin wanted it. In the massive shipyards that orbited Mars, new warships took shape in silence. The first ship was christened the Soul, a vessel of stunning design. Its hull could withstand impacts that would destroy older human ships. Its weapons systems were generations ahead of anything Earth had possessed before. But what made it truly special was invisible. It had an engine that could fold space in ways that no human had attempted before. Captain Han Min-jun stood in the construction dock, watching the Soul's final assembly. Han was 35 years old, and he had spent his entire adult life preparing for this moment without knowing what that moment would be. He was a natural military commander, thoughtful but decisive. When he received the promotion to lead the new warship construction project, he understood that it was secretly part of something larger. No one told him the details, but he was smart enough to understand. The work was hard. Scientists and engineers from every nation on Earth worked together. Money flowed into the project in ways that required careful hiding. Some of the funding came from secret trade deals with sympathetic alien species. Some came from Earth's own growing wealth. Most of it came from Secretary General Lee Na-Ree's strategic budget, which had access to resources that the public never saw. But Han never questioned it. He simply built ships. In a research facility on Earth, in a city called Daejeon, a different kind of work was happening. Dr. Yun So-ra worked in a laboratory that existed on no official map. She was a physicist of rare talent, a woman in her mid-40s who had spent her entire life pushing the boundaries of what humans understood about the universe. The problem she was working on seemed impossible at first. The Galactic Council had always maintained technological superiority over humanity. But what if that was not really true? What if the technology was not actually superior, but simply different? What if humans could develop new technology that was even better, but in ways that the Council had never thought to try? Dr. Yun believed this was possible. She had spent years analyzing alien technology that humans had managed to obtain. She studied the patterns. She examined what they had done and what they had not done. And then, in a flash of inspiration that came at 3 in the morning, she saw the answer. Humans thought differently than aliens. Humans made different assumptions. Humans approached problems from unusual angles because they came from a young civilization that had not been shaped by millions of years of doing things the same way. She began to write equations. She began to design. And slowly, over the course of 2 years, she and her team developed something revolutionary, a new type of power system that was far more efficient than anything the Galactic Council had created. It was not just incrementally better, it was fundamentally superior. When she showed the designs to Commander Park, Park actually smiled. "How long to build a prototype?" Park asked. 6 months, Dr. Yun said. "Maybe less." In another building, in another city, Minho was doing similar work. The Economist had created a team of the brightest financial minds that Earth had to offer. They were building something that was less visible, but just as important, a complete financial model of the Galactic Council's economy. Minho wanted to understand exactly how much the Council had earned from their exploitation of humanity. He wanted to know which Council members had benefited most. He wanted to understand the entire structure of their financial power. And most importantly, he wanted to find the weak points. Every economy has them. Every system of power has places where it is vulnerable. By the 8th year, Minho had created a map of the Council's finances that was so detailed that he could have predicted their economic moves months in advance. He knew which species depended on which trade relationships. He knew which alien civilizations had also been cheated by the Council. He knew exactly where to apply pressure to make the system break. Secretary General Lee Na-Ree visited all these projects in secret, moving through Earth's cities and orbital stations without public announcement. She saw the ships being built. She examined Dr. Yun's revolutionary technology. She studied Minho's economic models. And with each visit, she became more convinced that the plan would work. The hardest part was keeping it secret. Humans are not good at keeping secrets when they concern something this important. There were close calls. A reporter almost discovered the shipyard. A Galactic Council spy came dangerously close to understanding what Earth was doing. But each time, the secret held. By the 8th year, something else had changed. Humanity had begun to grow stronger in ways that had nothing to do with the secret project. Earth's population was increasing. Human colonies were spreading throughout space. Human scientists were making discoveries. Human culture was becoming more confident. Younger humans, like Captain Han Min-jun, did not remember a time when humanity was completely weak. They had grown up in a galaxy where humans had a voice that was sometimes heard. They had not accepted the idea that humans would always be inferior. This was important, though Park did not fully understand it until later. The project required not just technology and money. It required a change in how humans saw themselves. It required confidence. It required the belief that they deserved better than what they had been given. In the final months of the 8th year, Commander Park gathered the key people involved in the project. Captain Han Min-jun, Dr. Yun-so-ra Min-ho, Dr. Kang Ji-woo, and a few others met in a secure location. Secretary General Lee Na-ri was also there. "The Soul is complete," Han reported. "We have 12 more ships at various stages of completion. In 3 months, we will have 20 ships ready for active service. In 6 months, we will have 50. The power systems are ready," Dr. Yun added. "We have tested them completely. They work better than we predicted. A single human ship with this engine will be more powerful than 3 council ships with traditional engines." "The Allies are ready," Min-ho said. "I have identified 17 alien civilizations that have reasons to want the Council weakened. Some have also been cheated. Others simply do not like Council dominance. They are waiting to see what humanity will do." Lee Na-ri listened to all of this carefully. Then she stood up. "The time is not yet," she said. "We need 3 more months. In 3 months we will be ready. In 3 months we will take our case to the Galactic Council, and we will demand justice." Park looked around the room at the people she had worked with for 8 years. They had built something together in secret. They had created tools of power. But the most important tool they had created was knowledge. Knowledge of what was owed, knowledge of what was possible, and knowledge that humanity was ready to claim what belonged to them. "In 3 months," Park said, "the galaxy will change." And in those final 3 months, humanity prepared for the most important moment in the species' history. The ships were armed with weapons that the Council had never seen. The scientists made sure their technology was ready. The economists checked their calculations one final time, and Captain Han Min-jun received his orders from Park. The order was simple: "Get the fleet ready. When I call, we move." Han understood. He checked the Soul systems personally. He made sure his crews were trained. And he waited, knowing that something extraordinary was coming. On a quiet day in the 8th year, in a small office on Earth, Commander Park Soo-jin sat at her desk and wrote a single message. It was addressed to the Galactic Council. It was polite, it was professional, and it was an invitation to a meeting that would bring the entire galactic civilization to the edge of collapse. The message read simply, "We would like to discuss an old debt. We believe you will find our evidence very interesting." Park saved the message and set it to send in exactly 3 months. Then she looked out her window at the stars above Earth and allowed herself to smile. The waiting was almost over. The time to settle the debt was coming. The neutral space station called Zephyr was one of the most important places in the known galaxy. For hundreds of years, it had served as the meeting place for the Galactic Council. The station was enormous, large enough to house thousands of diplomats, traders, and officials. Its corridors were filled with alien species from dozens of different civilizations. Nothing important happened in the galaxy without being discussed somewhere on Zephyr. Secretary General Lee Na-ri arrived on the station with 500 humans. This was unusual. Normally, diplomatic delegations were much smaller. Humans usually sent 10 or 20 people to these meetings, but Lee had made the decision that this time would be different. As the humans disembarked from their transport ships, alien species stopped and stared. Something significant was happening. Everyone could feel it. The air on Zephyr seemed to change. Normally, the station was full of noise and activity, but now the corridors became quieter as word spread. The humans had come in force. Lee Na-ri was led to the council chamber, a vast room with seats arranged in a circle. The chamber was designed so that every species felt equal, though everyone understood that the older, more powerful civilizations had more influence. The Thorians sat at the position of greatest honor. The Vexithari, another ancient and powerful species, sat close to them. Younger civilizations like the Arenthians and the Cathari sat in less prominent positions. Lee took her place with her delegation. She wore a simple uniform of deep blue, a color that humans had chosen to represent Earth. She was calm, but her eyes were sharp and intelligent. "We appreciate the Council's willingness to meet," Lee began. "Today, we have a presentation that is very important to humanity. We ask for your full attention." Commander Park Soo-jin stood and made a gesture. Her team activated the viewing systems. Suddenly, in the space above the council chamber, an image appeared. The human fleet. Not a small fleet, a massive fleet of 300 advanced warships, all arranged in perfect formation, all emerging from fold space simultaneously in a demonstration of coordinated power that had never been seen before. The council erupted in shock. Several representatives stood up. Others spoke loudly to their neighbors. The Thorian ambassador, Dokthar, began demanding explanations before Lee had even started speaking. "Please," Lee said, and her voice was so calm and controlled that everyone in the chamber stopped to listen. "Let me finish. You will understand everything." The display changed. Now the humans showed the ancient database files. Minho stepped forward to explain. He was a small, quiet man, but his voice carried clearly through the chamber. "For 300 years, Minho said, Earth has paid taxes to the Galactic Council. We paid this in good faith, believing that we were receiving promised services and technology. Today, I am presenting evidence that shows something different." The screen filled with numbers. The accountant began to walk through the data. He showed the payments, all 47 trillion credits of them. He showed what Earth was supposed to receive in return. And then he showed what Earth actually received. The gap was enormous. It was impossible to ignore. "The Council has systematically overcharged my civilization," Minho said. "We have paid far more than was ever owed, and we have received far less than was promised." Dr. Kang Ji-woo took over the presentation. She was a serious scientist, and she spoke with complete confidence in her data. She showed the Council's own records, the documents that proved they had known about the overcharge. She showed internal communications between Council members, communications that revealed they had discussed whether to reduce the fees. They had decided not to. The Council chamber was completely silent now. The Arenthians whispered to each other. The Cathari looked shocked. Even the Thorians seemed uncertain, though Dokthar's expression grew darker with each new piece of evidence. Lee Nari stood again. "Based on this evidence, humanity presents the following claim. The Galactic Council has defrauded our civilization of 327 trillion credits. We are demanding payment of this amount within 1 standard year. If payment is not made, humanity will begin seizing Council assets throughout occupied space as collateral. We will also revoke all trade agreements with participating Council members and implement an economic embargo against any species that continues to support the Council's position." The effect was immediate. The chamber exploded into chaos. Some representatives were angry, others were frightened. Some seemed to be calculating what this meant for their own position. Dokthar stood up. He was a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms. His voice was loud and commanding as he had not needed to be heard in this chamber for centuries. "This is ridiculous," Dokthar said. "Human, you dare make demands of the Galactic Council. We could destroy your entire civilization with a fraction of our power. You are a new species. You are weak. We owe you nothing." Lee Nari smiled. Not a happy smile, but a satisfied one. She had waited for this response. "Commander Park, please execute Protocol 1, Lee said quietly. In the space above the station, the 300 human ships began to move. They moved with precision. They moved with purpose. And suddenly, they disappeared. Not destroyed, but jumping through fold space, reappearing just outside Council space. It was a display of tactical capability that made several Council members go pale. Lee turned back to Dokthar. "You are correct that you could destroy humanity. You have superior numbers. You have older technology. But I wonder if you have considered what would happen if you tried. My ships are in position. If you attack Earth, I have orders to destroy your worlds, every Thorian colony, every Vexathari trade station, every financial institution the Council controls. My soldiers are prepared to follow those orders." It was a bluff, partially. The human fleet could not actually destroy the Council, but it could hurt them badly. It could cause damage, and Dokthar could not know for certain whether Lee was bluffing or not. "We are not asking for forgiveness," Lee continued. "We are not asking for mercy. We are presenting the bill for the future. You have 1 year to pay. If you do not, we will collect it ourselves." Then Lee turned and walked toward the chamber exit. As she moved, the human delegation stood and followed her. 500 humans rising and walking toward the door, their movement purposeful and calm. Dokthar stood motionless. For the first time in 300 years, an alien species had stood up to the Galactic Council and refused to back down. As Lee reached the door, a young Arenthian representative stood up. "Secretary General," the Arenthian called out. Lee turned. "We support your claim. My civilization will support a full investigation into Council practices." One by one, other species began to speak. The Cathari said they would also investigate. The Rinthal Collective expressed doubt about the Council's truthfulness. Even some younger Council members seemed to be reconsidering their position. But Dokthar sat in silence, his expression unreadable. Lee Nari walked out of the chamber, and the entire galaxy knew that something fundamental had changed. The Council was no longer invulnerable. A new power had risen to challenge it. And that power had armed itself with something far more dangerous than weapons. It had armed itself with truth. As Lee boarded the human transport that would carry her and her delegation back to their fleet, she looked back at Zephyr. The station hung in space, neutral and ancient. But it was no longer certain what the galaxy's future would be. In the chamber behind her, the Galactic Council erupted into arguments that would last for hours. What had just happened? How should they respond? Some wanted to attack. Others wanted to negotiate. Dokthar wanted to find out everything about human capability before making any decision. But while they argued, a simple message was being transmitted throughout the galaxy. In thousands of systems, in millions of homes, beings across the known universe learned the story. A young species had challenged the ancient powers, and the ancient powers did not know how to respond. The game had changed. The debt would be collected, and the galaxy would never be quite the same again. When the Galactic Council refused to pay, humanity did not respond with anger or threats. Instead, they responded with something far more dangerous: cold, methodical precision. Captain Han Min-jun received his orders from Commander Park. The orders were detailed and specific. They outlined exactly which Council assets to seize, in what order, and with what level of force. The remarkable thing was that all of these seizures were technically legal. Humans had spent years studying ancient interstellar property laws, uncovering clauses and regulations that had been forgotten for centuries. The first seizure happened on a mining station near the Thorian homeworld. Han's ships arrived with a legal document in hand. The document clearly showed that according to old property law, because the Thorians had failed to pay their debt, their off-world assets could be claimed as collateral. The station's human workers entered peacefully, asked everyone to leave, and took control of the facility. It was done without violence. No one was hurt. But the message was clear. Humanity was serious. Over the next 3 weeks, it happened again and again. A research facility was seized, a trade station was claimed, a mining operation was taken over. Each time, humans arrived with legal documents. Each time, the seizure was technically correct according to old laws that the Council had forgotten existed. The Council protested loudly. They demanded that the seizures stop. But they could not use military force without breaking the Kel-Torin Peace Treaty, an ancient agreement that prevented direct military action between major powers. And if they broke the treaty, they would lose the support of neutral species, so they could do nothing but watch as their wealth was slowly taken away. At the same time, Dr. Yunsora began the second part of the plan. She authorized the release of humanity's revolutionary technology to non-council alien species. Within weeks, the Arenthians had the designs for the new power systems. The Cathari received advanced weapons designs. The Rinthul Collective got access to revolutionary manufacturing techniques. It was a gift that came with a simple message. This is what we can do. Imagine what we could do together. The effect was stunning. Species that had previously relied on council technology suddenly had access to equipment that was far superior. Within months, the economic advantage that the council had maintained for millions of years began to disappear. Council technology became obsolete. Entire industries in the council's heartland stopped being profitable. Trade began to shift. Species that had always bought from council suppliers began buying from others instead. The Thorian merchant fleet, which had controlled galactic trade for centuries, found themselves with no one to trade with. Their ships sat empty in harbors. Minho coordinated the final part of the pressure campaign. He worked with sympathetic alien civilizations to create an alternative trade network. Species that had been cheated by the council joined the network. Species that simply wanted better technology joined. Species that wanted to reduce council power joined. Within 6 months, the council's economic power had been cut by 60%. They were not ruined, but they were wounded, and for the first time in their history, they were not the most powerful force in the galaxy. Back on Earth, Commander Park managed the information carefully. She made sure that the galaxy understood humanity was not being cruel. They were simply collecting what was owed. They were not being vindictive. They were being fair. A story spread through the galaxy about how a young human engineer had personally negotiated with seized Thorian workers, helping them find new jobs and new homes. Another story emerged about how humans had protected council property that they had seized, keeping it safe and protected so it could be returned if the council paid the debt. These stories were true. Park had specifically ordered her people to treat seized facilities and workers with respect. This was partly for moral reasons, but it was also strategy. If humans appeared to be cruel or excessive, the galaxy might side with the council. But if humans appeared to be fair and reasonable, forced to take harsh action only because the council refused to do the right thing, then the galaxy would support them. It worked. Species that had been neutral began to speak out against the council. Even some lower-ranking council members began to wonder if the Thorians had been right to refuse payment. Dokthar tried to hold the council together. He demanded that other council members support the Thorians. He offered money to species that agreed to support his position. He threatened those who opposed him. But none of it worked. The council was falling apart. The Arenthians formally announced their support for humanity's claim. They presented their own evidence showing that they had also been cheated by the council, by similar amounts, through similar methods. They demanded their own reparations. The Cathari followed with similar evidence. Then the Spiral Alliance. Then 7 other species. Suddenly, the council was facing claims from 17 different civilizations. The total amount owed was over 2,000 trillion credits. The council's entire wealth could not cover it. Desperation began to set in among the council's leadership. Smaller council members began to negotiate privately with human diplomats, offering partial payments to escape the blockade. Some offered to leave the council entirely. Others offered to help enforce the claims against the Thorians if it meant they could avoid similar seizures. The Thorian syndicate's position became impossible to maintain. They were isolated. Their allies were abandoning them. Their wealth was being systematically taken, and there was nothing they could do. Commander Park watched it all from her office on Earth. She had not needed to fire a single weapon. She had not needed to invade anyone. She had simply understood how power worked in the galaxy, and she had used that understanding against her enemies. A message came through to Park late one night. It was from Dokthar. The Thorian ambassador wanted to negotiate. Park smiled. She had known this moment would come. The negotiations took place in neutral space, on a small station that was controlled by neither the Council nor humanity. Park sent Captain Han Min-jun to represent humanity. Han was a skilled negotiator, and he had been instructed to be firm but fair. "My people are suffering," Dokthar said at the first meeting. His voice was tired. He was no longer the powerful ambassador who had laughed at humanity's claims. "Then pay the debt," Han said simply. "We cannot pay the full amount," Dokthar said. "It is too much. Our entire civilization's wealth is not enough." "Then pay what you can," Han said, "and surrender your leadership position in the Council. The Thorians will accept responsibility for the fraud, and in exchange, we will gradually return the seized property." Dokthar looked at him for a long time. Then he said, "And the other species? The ones who are now making similar claims?" "Will be settled individually," Han said. "But the pattern will be the same. Pay what you owe, or accept the consequences." It took 3 more weeks of negotiation, but eventually an agreement was reached. The Thorians would pay 289 trillion credits over 10 years. In return, humanity would stop the seizures and return most of the property they had taken. The Thorians would also remove Dokthar from his position of power. More importantly, the Galactic Council agreed to undergo complete restructuring. A new financial system would be created. All contracts would be made public and auditable. No single species could dominate financial decisions anymore. The pressure campaign had worked perfectly. Not a single shot had been fired. Not a single species had been invaded. Yet the entire galactic power structure had been transformed. Commander Park received the news of the agreement and felt something that she had not allowed herself to feel in 9 years: satisfaction. The first part of the job was done. Now came the harder part, making sure that the new system remained in place, and that the galaxy understood never to underestimate humanity again. The day of the settlement was declared a holiday across the Galactic Council. Representatives from every species gathered once again on the neutral station Zephyr to witness the historic moment. The settlement would be signed not in the council chamber, but in a new chamber that was being built specifically for this purpose, a chamber dedicated to transparency and fairness. Secretary General Lee Nari stood on one side of a desk. On the other side stood the new Thorian representative, not Dokthar, but a younger Thorian named Dekra, who represented the Thorian people's attempt to move forward from their past mistakes. Between them lay the settlement document, written in 17 different languages, signed by representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy. The numbers were staggering. The Thorians agreed to pay 289 trillion credits. The other species that had been defrauded agreed to payments totaling another 217 trillion credits. In total, more than 500 trillion credits would flow from the exploiting species to those who had been wronged. Lee Nari held up a pen. Dekra did the same. At the same moment, they both signed the document. The crowd that was watching, both in person and through broadcasts across the galaxy, erupted in celebration. It was not just a moment of victory. It was a moment of justice. Civilizations that had suffered for centuries had finally been heard. Species that had been exploited had finally been recognized. But the signing of a document was only the beginning of the real work. Commander Park had been named to oversee the implementation of a new treaty, the Treaty of Reconciliation. This treaty would fundamentally reshape how the Galactic Council operated. The old hierarchy that had given ancient species more power than younger species would be eliminated. Every species would have equal voting rights. Financial decisions would require approval from a committee that included representatives from all species, not just the powerful ones. Most importantly, all contracts between species would be made public and auditable. There would be no more hidden fees. There would be no more systematic overcharging. The days of one species being able to exploit another without consequences were over. Li Na-ri was appointed to the Financial Oversight Committee, and within months she became its chairwoman. It was an unprecedented position for a human. But the galaxy had learned something important. Humans were honest. Humans were competent, and humans took their responsibilities seriously. Humanity used the reparations money wisely. A portion of it was distributed to all humans, creating wealth that allowed people across Earth to improve their lives. But most of it was invested in long-term development. New colonies were established, research facilities were built, universities were created to train the next generation of human scientists and engineers. Dr. Yun So-ra became the head of the newly formed Galactic Research Institute, a position that gave her control over scientific research and development for the entire council. She used her position to ensure that scientific advances were shared among all species, not hoarded by the powerful. This decision alone transformed the galaxy in ways that would be felt for generations. Minho left his position in the Defense Ministry to become Earth's chief economist in the Galactic Council. He spent his time teaching other species how to build sustainable economies, how to avoid the mistakes that had led to the Council's corruption, and how to create systems where all species could prosper together. Dr. Kang Ji-woo led the effort to audit every financial transaction that had occurred under the old Council system. Her team found evidence of additional corruption that no one had expected. Species had been cheating other species in ways that made the original fraud look small. But instead of using this information as leverage, Kang pushed for restorative justice, for systems where victims were compensated and perpetrators were held accountable. But the goal was healing, not revenge. Captain Han Min-jun received a promotion that surprised many in the military. He was named the first admiral of the United Earth Defense Force. His position did not come with the authority to attack other species. Instead, it came with responsibility for protecting humanity and ensuring that the new peaceful order was maintained. The galaxy changed. Trade increased. Species that had been enemies for centuries began to work together. The Arenthians and the Thorians, who had never trusted each other, signed a scientific cooperation treaty. The Cathari and the Vexithari, ancient rivals, agreed to share information about propulsion systems. Not everything was perfect. Some council members remained bitter about humanity's actions. Some species still did not trust the new system. But gradually, over months and years, a new reality took shape. A reality where power was more evenly distributed. A reality where younger species had a voice. A reality where fraud and exploitation were no longer acceptable. Dokthar, the former Thorian ambassador, faced a trial for his role in the fraud. He was found guilty of systematic deception and sentenced to imprisonment on a neutral station. He would spend the rest of his life there, a symbol of the cost of corruption. Commander Park was offered a position in the new Galactic Council government. She declined. Instead, she asked to be transferred to a teaching position at the military academy on Earth. She wanted to train the next generation of human military officers. She wanted to make sure that humanity never forgot how power worked in the galaxy. In her final speech to the Council before stepping down from active service, Park stood before representatives of every species in known space. "When my civilization was wronged," she said, "we had a choice. We could accept the injustice. We could seek revenge. Or we could demand accountability while building something better. We chose the third path, and I believe the galaxy is better because of it." She paused and looked directly at the representatives of the species that had exploited humanity for so long. "The debt has been paid," she continued. "The past has been settled, but now we must all work together to build a future where this kind of exploitation never happens again. That is the real victory, not the money we received, but the system we have created together." The speech was broadcast across the galaxy. In homes on 1,000 worlds, beings from 100 species watched and understood something important. The universe was changing. Power was not permanent. Justice could be achieved, but only when courage met opportunity and when a species was willing to be patient, careful, and thorough. Back on Earth in Seoul, a statue was being built. It showed a woman in military uniform looking toward the stars. The statue was not meant to celebrate war or violence. It was meant to celebrate something more subtle: the power of determination, the value of planning, and the importance of standing up for what was right. The inscription on the statue's base read simply, "Commander Park Soo-jin, who taught the galaxy that the meek inherit not just the Earth, but the stars as well." Humanity was no longer a species that lived in the shadow of older, more powerful civilizations. They were partners now. They were leaders. They were the species that had proven that justice could be achieved not through violence, but through careful planning, knowledge, and the courage to stand up for what was right. The settlement was complete. The new order was established, and the galaxy had learned a lesson it would not forget for generations to come.